and property taxes by almost $600 million. And now, as the executive director of Citizens for Limited Taxation, she's leading a drive in this state to repeal the income surtax and to put a cap on state taxes. Welcome to Newsmakers, Barbara. It's nice to have you.
Thanks, Meg.
I like one of the things you said in a recent Boston Globe article was that you've always been sort of a rebel and that you like to make waves. And I'm wondering what keeps you going after you've now been director for 5 years of the organization and you're now leading another drive. You know, what keeps you going in this effort?
It's fun. Yeah, it's rewarding, and you really feel like you're accomplishing something, and you know, all the usual.
There's a purpose to it.
Yes.
Did you always tell me a little bit about how you got started and how you changed or how you adapted your life from your chores as a housewife and a swimming teacher to...
I really wasn't all that much of a housewife. I mean, I made an effort, you know, but it really wasn't anything I was terribly good at. I was a swimming instructor, and this is a lot like that. I mean, you take people who think that something can't be done. You know, the little kid who says, I can't swim, I'm afraid of the water, and you just, you know, give him a little shove, and pretty soon he's diving off the high board and is pleased with himself. Government's a lot like that. You know, they tend to respond only when they have to respond. And if you can just encourage government a little bit to do the right thing, as we did with our initiative petition the first time, and we'll do again with our new initiative petition, then pretty soon they're diving off the high board, and you think, wow, it works.
You get frustrated, though, by government officials. You don't think that they necessarily have the people's best interest at heart.
You know,
that frustrates
just
you?
By the nature of government, it's the system, not so much the people, which is, you know, you've got to get elected, and you've got to do things in the short term very quickly to inspire people to vote for you again, and you have to take credit for what other people have done and not give credit to your opposition even when they do something right. And it gets to be a very political situation, which isn't the best way to get things accomplished. So by going outside that system with an initiative petition process, we can inspire them in a way to do what they know they should be doing, but simply don't have the incentive to do otherwise.
Have you been inspired in this drive, the one you're involved in now?
Yeah, the
people
Senate President
inspired?
is a big inspiration, yes.
The Senate President?
Yes.
Bill Bulger?
Because otherwise I think the legislature would have repealed the surtax this year. The House was definitely going in that direction. And the governor was finally forced to say that he would go along with surtax repeal when he saw it on the ballot with him next year, if he didn't. So I think there would have been a genuine effort to repeal the surtax. The only person blocking it at the moment is the Senate President.
Let's explain, let's step back a second and explain what you want, what your organization wants to be done, obviously, repealing the income surtax. And let's talk a little bit about what your plan is and then relate it to what's going on in the House and the Senate and with the governor.
Well, what we're really trying to do is step 2 of the tax revolt. We did Proposition 2.5, and the cities and towns are pretty well taken care of. They're allowed their 2.5% increase a year, and then they're getting a factor for genuine growth in construction, and they're getting a lot of local aid. So the cities and towns are fine. Now at the state level, the state is taking in record revenues because our economy is so strong. If they spend those record revenues, if they spend up to their 13.6% revenue increase with inflation only 4%, then of course when the economy slows down, they've got those new programs and all those new state employees already used to being there. People are accustomed to that program and depending upon it, and the people are accustomed to their jobs. Then at that point, they have to cut back on their services or their jobs or raise taxes. We're trying to stabilize the system and say, once, if taxes go up a certain amount, it can only be the amount that wages and salaries have gone up. They can't have wages and salaries going up in the state 9 or 10% and have taxes going up, tax revenues going up 13 or 14% and spend at that level. They have to give some of it back then to the taxpayers. In order to do that, we first repeal the surtax, getting us back to a rational level of taxation. And then on top of that, we say once the surtax is gone, state tax revenues can only go up at the same rate of growth of wages and salaries.
Now, about the surtax, let's have a little history on how long it's been effective in the state and what people will get back if it's repealed. Tell us those two things first.
The surtax is, first of all, part of our limit. It's necessary, as I just said, to making the limit work. But secondarily, it's also a moral issue and stands on itself. We had a temporary surtax 10 years ago. It was the 10th anniversary of the temporary surtax a couple of weeks ago. And the reason was the fiscal crisis, the genuine fiscal crisis in 1975. And they told us at the time that they'd put on this surtax in violation of the governor's campaign promise of no new taxes.
This was under Governor Dukakis now. We're talking about 10 years. The first governor, 10 years ago.
And it was a necessary temporary tax. But it's now 10 years later. There's a state surplus ranging between $300 and $400 million. They certainly shouldn't still have an emergency temporary surtax on the books. So we're going to repeal that surtax on the moral issue of it shouldn't be there, darn it, after 10 years. And also then, of course, because it makes the limit work. It makes the limit start to work immediately.
Now, what does that mean for individual taxpayers if that's repealed? What will they get in return for that?
Well, if it had been repealed this year, it would be about $89, $90, or $90 a year, based upon figures that I've seen from the House Ways and Means Committee. Depends upon your income level, of course.
Now, I guess the natural question is, if this is repealed in '86, how long is it going to be before a new tax is instituted? You know, will the state run out of money? Will the fiscal crisis again reappear? You know, what's the prognosis if we do repeal it? Are we going to have to get a new tax down the road?
That's why we tied it in with the state tax limit. Obviously, if you go out and repeal one tax, then there's always a possibility they'll raise another tax to make up that income. So we have both the surtax repeal and the state tax limit tied in with the growth in wages and salaries as part of the same package, so that this can't happen.
Now, explain to me what's going on in the House and the Senate and on the part of the governor, because both the House and the Senate have passed bills about repealing the surcharge. What's the status now?
Well, we had originally planned just to do a state tax limit, and then this spring the governor had said at a press conference that if the House and Senate passed a surtax repeal, he would veto that. So it seemed clear that it wasn't going to happen, so we made that part of our package. That was last April. Then in the summer, the House voted to repeal the surtax, the 3-year phase out of the surtax, and that went into the Senate for the follow-up Senate vote. And at that point, we had to file our initiative petition. So we were waiting to see what would happen. Nothing happened. The Senate simply sat on it, as the Senate's been sitting on all the House bills that are important this year. So at that time, we put it in the petition. After we started to collect signatures on our petition, then the Senate came in and voted to repeal the surtax in 1 year. Now, ours was a 2-year phase-out, the House was a 3-year, and the Senate was going to do it in 1 year, but the Senate also had new taxes attached to it, as you said would inevitably happen with the Senate. It happened even before the surtax was repealed. As part of that same package, they were going to create a new tax on business. Well, naturally, the House, looking at a $300 to $400 million surplus, was not going to go along with a tax increase on business this year, and the Senate knew that. So, of course, the whole thing got bogged down, and it went into a conference committee. House members and Senate members meeting to iron out their differences. It's been there for a couple of months now.
And the House is now on leave. I don't know if leave is the right word. It's
the House recessed for a couple of weeks. Simply, I guess the reason they did is the Senate won't act on any of their bills, so they figure why should they hang around when the Senate sits on all this legislation until the end of the year, till there's a crisis building up. It's the end of the year. What do we do now? And then, of course, the Senate president can wheel and deal to get legislation through. It's an old game. We're tired of it, the taxpayers are tired of it, and I think the House is tired of it as well, so they just left for a couple of weeks to let the Senate president sit there and play his games all by himself. Meanwhile, we'll get our signatures, and then the surtax will be repealed without the cooperation of the Senate.
You're talking now a little bit about power struggles and traditional politics as you see it. And this morning in today's Globe, there's an interesting article about George Kavarian and Senate President Bulger and the conflicts that are going on between the two of them, and what that's resulting in is a lack of action by the House and the Senate on some legislation.
Yes,
but
I don't agree with the sort of implication that the House is responsible for this. It isn't so much between the Senate President and the House Speaker. It's between the Senate and the House, the way they are. The House has been reformed. We all know they went through a rules reform process. In the House, the individual members have some say about what goes on. The committee chairs have a lot of power. Chairman Volker, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Jack Flood, the chairman of the House Taxation Committee, these people help to set the policy, and the House Speaker follows their recommendations. In the Senate President rules. He just rules, and everybody does exactly what he tells them to do. So you're comparing democracy and dictatorship here, essentially. Democracy and autocracy, really, because the senators allow him to do that. They don't have to allow it, they do allow it. So looking at the two systems, the Senate's starting to look pretty bad.
You're saying what Senate President Bulger wants he can get, and what he doesn't want, he's going to make it very difficult.
Well, he can get what he wants in the Senate. Things have changed, though. He can't get what he wants in the House. He can no longer dictate to the House by going through an autocratic House Speaker. He now has to work with a House Speaker who is working with his membership. And the Senate, again, doesn't look good in comparison to the House.
So what's going to happen if you don't get enough signatures in your drive to bring this into the 1986 ballot, get it on the ballot? What's going to happen to the reform?
If we don't get the signatures, the people in this state will be paying the surtax for the rest of their lives.
How does it look now?
It will not be repealed.
As of this week, how does it look for your
It looks pretty good. We're at the point where we've turned all the petitions in to the city and town clerks, except for Boston. We get an extra 5 days to petition in Boston. So Monday night, the 25th, all the petitions will be turned into Boston, and then the drive is over. then we have a couple of weeks to get them back from the city and town clerks and add them up and turn them into the Secretary of State's office.
Can you take me through the process a little bit? I'm really curious about what it's like to, if I say I want to get something on the calendar for '86, take me through the whole process of what you had to go through to get this.
It's difficult.
Rolling.
It's difficult, and it should be. You have to be a fairly responsible organization. You have to be able to raise money and have a statewide organization to do something like this. You have to first file your petition with the Attorney General, and he has to certify it for constitutional requirements, and then it goes to the Secretary of State's office, and they will print up the petitions. Then you go to the streets, and you have approximately 8 weeks in which to collect 61,508 certified signatures. That is, 61,508 registered voters have to sign it. So you need about 80 or 90,000 raw signatures to get that 61,508. And you have to get them in 8 weeks, and you have to get no more than 1/4 from any one county. So you have to have a pretty much of a statewide organization in which to do this.
Yeah, how many people do you have working with you who have been around the state?
Of our members, about 1,200 are actually out there working and petitioning, doing a lot of work. Some of them will just get one sheet full, but we have about 1,200 people who are out there spending a lot of their free time doing this. And then we have our allies, the Republican State Committee, and Ray Shammy's group, Bill Robinson's group, the South Shore Chamber, a couple of other chambers working with us, and they've all got volunteers working on it as well.
Are there parts of the state where you've been more successful than other parts of the state? I mean, are there pockets where you've
yes,
had
but
better response?
because of our alliance, it's been helpful. I mean, CLT is strongest in Middlesex County and Essex County, and the Republicans are doing real well down at the Cape. They're better in the southern part of the state, and we're doing real well in Worcester ourselves this time. Ray Shammy's group is very strong in the western part of the state. So among the different groups working with us, we've covered almost all of the state, and we seem to be doing well in every county.
So what happens after you've gotten all the maybe 82 or 83,000 signatures? Where do you go from there?
All those signatures really do is give us the right to take this to the legislature. So it's filed as a regular bill with the legislature, and there's a committee hearing and a committee recommendation. The difference between this and another bill that's filed by a legislator is they have to vote on it. They can't put it in committee and sit on it. They can't combine it with another bill. They can't put it into a study. They have to vote on this petition by the first Wednesday in May. And they have to vote on it exactly the way people have signed it. They can't vote with amendments. It's a yes or no vote. If they vote yes, it becomes law. It never will go to the ballot. If they vote no, we get additional 10,000 signatures next June. And then it goes directly onto the 1986 ballot, very much like Prop 2.5 went on to the 1980 ballot.
Do you find people around the state asking a lot of questions as they go to potentially sign the petition, or are people just, tax cut, great, I love it,
one question, where's the pen? Yeah.
Where's the pen?
Yeah.
I know someone here, when we were talking about the show, and a friend of mine who works here at the station said, just ask Barbara Anderson when it would become effective. That's all I want to know. I want my money back.
And that would be January 1st of '86, half the surtax would be gone. In other words, it's retroactive. They'd vote on it in November of 1986, and then when they filled out their income tax form for calendar year '86 in April, half the surtax would be gone. And then come January 1st, '87, the second half would be gone. And the limit, hopefully, will stay in place forever, like Proposition 2.5.
We're going to take a short break, and when we return, I'd like to pick up on something you said. Welcome back to Newsmakers, and my guest is Barbara Anderson, who's the Executive Director of Citizens for Limited Taxation. And we were talking before the break about this state and hopes for Republicans. And what do you see about being in this state and being, you're a Republican? It's interesting. You have you're sort of a dichotomy in your background. Is it true you're a Democrat and also on the Republican town committee in your town?
Well, I was raised Democrat, and I don't think I ever saw a Republican before I was 18 years old. And I just decided to be a Republican because Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, and I made up my mind when I read Uncle Tom's Cabin, which I know isn't the sort of thing you're supposed to say nowadays, but I did read it. It made a tremendous impression on me when I was 12 years old. So I thought, when I grow up, I'm going to be the same party as Abraham Lincoln. That's about all it means to me. I'm not interested in partisan politics one way or another. I think the smartest thing people could do if they really wanted to stabilize things at the state level is everybody tomorrow morning run out and register the minority party, whatever it is. In other words, everyone would go out tomorrow and register Republican. The day that the Republicans took over and took power, everyone would run out and register Democrat. And this would drive them crazy on the Hill, because they tend to think so much in partisan terms that they wouldn't know what to do with that. And I think it's totally irrelevant what party you are. I think people should do more of what I do, simply vote the candidate and the issue.
But obviously the parties have a very different perspective on certain issues in this state and nationwide.
And because people tend to think it's important, it becomes important. And so then you have a majority party abuse of power, and you need a strong minority party. More of a balance, I think, to straighten things out.
What else? I mean, you've been on the inside. What else drives you crazy about either politicians or government or the way our system works or doesn't work? You know, what are the things you've been through it all, and you've been sort of on the outside and yet on the inside?
The thing that's always bothered me is any kind of elitism. You know, any politician who really thinks he knows better than I do how to live my life, spend my money, get through my days. I don't like that kind of attitude. I don't think anyone can conceivably know better than I do what's best for me. And I generally tend to resist that no matter who it's coming from. And I like the kind of politician who is in there genuinely trying to do the right thing, but admitting once in a while that he doesn't have all the answers, and sort of inspiring us all to work with him instead of telling us what to do.
Is there anybody you know who's like that now? I mean, in this state or government? Anybody you admire?
I tended to throw together as a political type Ronald Reagan and Ray Flynn. I think that type of leader who inspires you to feel good about yourself, about your country or your city, and want to cooperate, as opposed to coming in as Governor Dukakis does and say, wear those seatbelts, I know what's best for you. That annoys me, and I think President Reagan's attitude and Ray Flynn's attitude are more acceptable.
Would be an interesting combination if you could combine the two. The two men, of course, I don't know, they share being Irish, I guess. That's one thing in common.
Maybe that's a lot of it, I don't know.
You called the Dukakis administration, the Dukakis government, elitist recently. You were quoted as saying that.
Probably, that's how I feel about it.
You think that the Dukakis administration tells people exactly the way things should be and doesn't give them much opportunity to be, you know, to
I think they would
part?
given an opportunity. One of the reasons that I think the governor is so high in the polls is that he has not been allowed to do any of the things he would have liked to have done. He's come up with some ideas for legislation that lobbyists like us and the High Tech Council, the Mass Municipal Association, and others have been strong enough to stop him from doing. So I think if he had been allowed throughout his administration to do whatever he wanted to do, then we would have had legislation that would have made people angry. But as it is, because he has been willing to back off, not wanting to anger anybody, we've got pretty much control over the situation, and nothing terrible has happened in the last 3 years.
Where do you sense he's going on the issue of the surtax? Where do you think he's heading this week?
Wherever the wind is blowing. I think the governor said he would veto it. He did not want to repeal the surtax. Then he saw the petition drive coming. Now he's all for it. Maybe he is. Maybe the Senate president is blocking it for him. We just simply don't know that. But I think another thing I would like to see on the part of people who disagree with me on issues is a little integrity. I'd like people who disagree with me to stand up and stand for something so we can debate it. That's why I like ballot questions. I like black and white questions on the ballot. And then you can have a really good debate, and then people can come to some kind of an intelligent decision. And that's why the process, the initiative petition process, I think is more important than any issue that is on the ballot. It's the idea of getting the information out there and showing some respect for people's ability to make decisions for themselves.
Do you think people in this state, probably because you work closely with people around the state in terms of 2.5 and tax revolts and tax rebellion and the rest of it, are people becoming better educated at all as the years go on about what part they can play in government?
Yes, I think what people are realizing, though, the new term, or the new way of defining populism, it used to be, you know, we the people know better, and actually most people are more humble than that. They don't think they know everything. We become more aware with the complexity of civilization that we don't know everything. What we've done, though, is become more aware of the fact that our leaders don't know any more than we do. And while it is true that some issues are very complicated for a ballot, it is also true that they're also very complicated for the average state legislator. And if you ever watch legislation being made on the Hill, you're aware that most legislators don't have the slightest idea what they're voting on. And they tend to follow the particular leader who is an expert in the area. This can also happen on a ballot question. People will either listen to me or to the leader of my opposition and make their own decisions, and that's just as effective a way to make legislation is to have legislators listening to the chairman who's the expert in his area on the Hill.
But most people don't do what you did. If most people think they have, maybe they don't think the way you do, which is that you do have a power to change something or to affect legislation. Most people say, oh, my, you know, it's just government and what can I do? You know, they look at the summit between President of this country and Mr. Gorbachev, and they say, you know, who knows? I can't change things. Or some people do, but it's rare that people do what you've done.
Well, yes, but the people who did what we've done were the people themselves. I mean, I can't do anything without people signing petitions and going out and collecting signatures for us. So, and we couldn't do anything if people didn't have enough faith in the system to vote for Prop 2.5. So it really was the people doing something. And if people want to do something about war, you know, preventing war, then I guess each of us can promise never to hit anyone first and hope that it spreads.
Especially on the Senate floor of politics. What do you think it will happen after this? Let's say this ends now very nicely, and we get it on the ballot in '86. What would be your next challenge after that?
What we want to do, what we've always wanted to do, is put something in our state constitution that says the taxes are limited to this much. This constitution has other protections in it: our freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. but no one ever put anything in it that said they couldn't take all our money. And we wanted something eventually in the Constitution, just a simple statement that says this much and no more.
Who do you see taking that leadership here in the state in terms of the Republican Party? I wanted to talk about that a little bit earlier, but who do you see becoming a spokesperson for the Republicans in the state? Ray Shammy has sort of backed away right now from being that person.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I just don't tend to think in those terms. Mm-hmm. You see Republicans working with the taxpayers, and we do count on them a lot on Beacon Hill. But you see some Democrats like Dick Moore of Oxbridge and Bob Sarasoli of Quincy who are helping us get signatures, even though they're part of the Democratic House. And I think we need more cooperation and less partisanship. I really believe that, to start thinking in terms of ourselves as citizens of the Commonwealth instead of members of a political party. Enough with the political parties.
Have you ever thought of running, though, even though you're not especially tuned into one party or the other? You ever thought of running for an elected office?
I really don't want to. I'd rather be outside the system, working with it than part of the system and then getting bogged down in that system.
It must be really interesting to be a lobbyist and to be involved in what's happening inside as well as out.
Yes.
And I think people very rarely have an opportunity to understand what that really is like. And that's what you've really shared with people through the years, is that you can make these kind of changes and make this noise and it goes someplace.
And you'd be surprised. I mean, as an activist, I'm outside the system, but then I had to become a lobbyist to work with 2.5 after it was passed within the system. And the system responds very well to this sort of thing. I'm not treated badly on Beacon Hill. They accept me as part of the overall system, the part that speaks for the taxpayers, while other special interest groups speak for special interest lobbies. Mm-hmm. And it does work out quite well. Once you've made your statement, once something's on the ballot and the people back you up, then you have a lot of clout once you get into the inside.
As we sit here this week, though, are you very confident that your drive will be successful? Or do you have a feeling one way or another?
I feel pretty good about it. If we pick up those extra signatures in Boston that will be filed Monday night, I think that'll make up for a rainy election day, which hurt us, and we should get enough signatures.
How's your organization changed through the years? I'm interested in the people who are now working for you as opposed to how you started back in 1980, which was 5 years ago. And what kind of people have become involved in Citizens for Limited Taxation?
Well, it's hard to tell, and we don't do a demographic study of our membership. And I think they're mostly just activists, people who think you can do something about something. I think originally the organization was a lot more radical. And as we worked with the system and began to understand the complexities of making the system work, we've become a lot more tolerant of government, the way it has to operate, and we see ourselves more as trying to aid the process than attacking it, and I think that's been successful.
What do you say to the people who aren't in favor necessarily of your tax cap, who say that you can't afford, cities and towns in the state will not be able to afford providing services for the people in their towns if you were to put a cap on the level of taxes? What do you say to the critics who aren't necessarily in back of this?
Well, it's hard when the argument doesn't make any sense. There's no possibility that they won't have the money for services. I mean, this is only a statute like Prop 2.5. It can be overridden if there's an emergency. And if they can justify to the people overriding the cap, as they have to justify it at the local level to override Prop 2.5, then they can have more money. Mm-hmm. So there's no possibility of a crisis. There's only a possibility that they will have to vote to override, and that they will then pay for it at the polls if the people don't understand, if they can't sell to the people, the reason for having to do that.
It, of course, makes the state very attractive to outside business. You know, for a number of years we were going through some hard times. Our taxes were very high, and the attractiveness of the state was not there. And now that's turned around quite a bit.
We were Taxachusetts, and we're now down to about the national average in taxes and below in revenues. So that's a very good sign. And as this has happened, as our taxes have gone down, our economy has gone up, and our unemployment has gone down, and the state's in very, very good shape. So as long as the tax cuts and tax limitation is working, we just need more of it.
Do you think that it's obviously, what you're saying is obviously very reflective of what President Reagan says? It's less government, it's lower taxes, it's people taking responsibility for themselves, and it's really something that's made, one of the things that's made him very popular with a lot of people in the country.
And it's a great concept. It's easier to prove at the state level, because at the state level you cut taxes, they limit their spending. At the federal level, they can monetize the debt, they can drive up inflation, they can stop defending the country. There are ways around tax limitation at the federal level, so it's very difficult to do, and President Reagan has all my sympathy.
Do you have a lot of time to do other things besides what you're doing? I mean, what's your daily schedule like?
There are other things.
Are there other things?
No, it's really, what I'm doing is a lot of fun, and it's very social, so I get to see a lot of people, so I don't need a lot of time to spend with other people, and I've learned to pace myself, to take an occasional day off.
And you can think about other things. I mean, I know people who work so diligently on not only a single issue, but who care a lot about the way, the government works and other people and how it relates to them. They're very serious, or they're very driven. Everything seems to interrelate, and I'm wondering, at times when you just sort of, obviously you have to relax and just forget about it all.
Well, yes, I guess in that same vein, when you're out there to save the world, everything relates to what you're doing.
What is it that you like? I was reading in the Globe, there's something that you like very much. I know it's a television show. You like amazing stories.
Oh, Spielberg's new
series.
Sometimes it is very, very funny. I like his sense of life. Mm-hmm. And you see that same sort of thing with writers like Ray Bradbury. And you see it in some of our political leaders. And I think that's what a leader does need, is that sense of life, that life is worth living, that no matter how bad the problems are, you can do something about it, that the greatest sin is apathy, giving up. And then you look forward to a future, maybe a science fiction type future, in which the world actually does work and everybody is better off than they are today.
Well, you've certainly tried to make your point, Barbara, and you've done that. And I appreciated meeting you and having you here. It's been nice talking with you.
It's been fun.
And thanks for watching. I'll see you next week at this time with another edition of Newsmakers. Until then, bye-bye.
The views and opinions expressed on Newsmakers are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of WSBK TV and/or the Storer Communications Company. This show is pre-recorded.